You're listening to the Accenture Insurance Influencers podcast.
Our egos are a big part of the challenge in the insurance industry right now. They tell us we're right. They lead us to believe we're better than we are. They like to blame others for issues and challenges. So we need to create a deeper understanding of our egos.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Igrana Yu, and my guest today is Don Bailey. Don is a partner at Bristlecone, a coaching, consulting, and leadership development firm. Previously, he was president of global sales for Marsh, president of Allstate B2B, and the North American CEO for Willis. Thanks for making the time to speak with me, Don.
Thank you.
Shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Okay, so tell me about Bristlecone. What do you do?
So let's start with the name, because I think it's relevant to what we do. So when we came up with a name for the firm, we wanted a brand that spoke to our beliefs. A good friend of mine had shared an alumni book from his alma mater, and in that monthly magazine was an article on the bristlecone pine tree. And I read the article and was captivated by the story. They grow above tree line in Eastern California. They can live to be 9,000 plus years old. And here's the twist. They only live that long if they have to endure harsh conditions: rain, snow, wind, heat, cold. They thrive where most other plants can't even grow. And why does that happen? They learn from the adversity. The roots, needles, bark, filtration systems all get better from the adversity. And so we love that metaphor for people and organizations when we were starting the business. Bristlecone's a mouthful, and it makes for a challenging email address, but it's right on point. So simply put, we are a coaching, consulting, and leadership development firm. And we created it a few years ago after I personally had come out of 30 years in the insurance experience that I had had over a few different firms. And our skills are pretty unique in this space. You mentioned a few of my roles in the introduction. I've been an executive in 4 Fortune 250 firms, been in the C-suite of 2 of those, all the quarterly earnings calls and everything that goes along with that. I've got deep experience in a broad list of areas, from growth strategies to compliance programs to regulatory investigations, legal proceedings, technology installations, operational efficiency programs, human capital initiatives, all of this sometimes comprising multi-billion-dollar P&Ls and 5,000-10,000 colleagues along the way. So it's been a global experience, 130 countries plus in some of the roles that I've had. And I've testified in front of Congress as an expert witness on terrorism, as well as conducted a number of acquisitions along the way. So that's a little bit on the Bristlecone name and a little bit on the background of myself a little more deeply and what we do: coaching, consulting, and leadership development.
And so you've got, as you mentioned, 30 years of experience in the insurance industry, C-suite experience, clearly demonstrated excellence there. How did you develop leadership skills?
So for me, I was very fortunate at an early age to be put in a number of different capacities. And I had big jobs early on, and I learned a lot about what leadership meant, sometimes by making huge mistakes, sometimes by coming up short, and sometimes by succeeding. But most of my learning certainly came from probably the failures and the shortcomings. And so for me, I early on kind of rallied around a definition of leadership. And my definition was very much the art and science of inspiration. And that's a lot of what I learned over the years leadership was. And when I think about some of the key words in that phrase, leadership is an art. Some people are better artists than others, just like there are better leaders than others. But what I learned over the years was that a great deal of leadership increasingly is science. The world of neuroscience offers us tremendous insights into the science of leadership. I personally invest a lot of time in the world of neuroscience, want to understand how learning and memory occur in people and organizations, understanding how change happens and often doesn't happen in people and organizations. There's considerable science available to us now that we never had when I was coming up through the ranks. So I think the purpose of it ultimately, the art and science of leadership, is to inspire people. We could probably put a few other words and labels in there, but I think at the end of the day, they probably point to the same thing. And so it's all about creating an environment where people are compelled to engage and to achieve.
Okay, that's a great working definition of leadership. With that in mind, let's talk about leadership in insurance. What challenges does the industry face right now?
So for most of the industry, I would point to three challenges that we're faced with. And none of these three challenges are new at all. They are challenges that have been put in front of us for many decades, and certainly the 3 decades that I've been in the business. The first challenge that I would highlight is the fact that much of our business, for a lot of the insurance industry, is annuity-based, meaning we have renewals. And that is a unique challenge to our business. The dynamic of not having to start over every year with 0 clients drives a certain malaise in the business and a certain sense of comfort in the business because we've always got these renewals. We've got these clients. That environment challenges innovation. It challenges creativity. It challenges differentiation. And it challenges employee and client engagement as well. So this concept of an annuity-based business, I think, is long been one of the challenges in this industry. The second challenge I would highlight is one that I would describe and often refer to as, quote unquote, the acceptable now. And what I mean by that is that for the past several decades, the results in the insurance industry have been fine. They've been solid. There have been exceptions to that, to be sure, but overall, the results represent what I would describe as an acceptable now. The results right now are generally acceptable. There's no burning platform, no case for change. There's nothing truly compelling that would drive big movements in the business right now. We haven't seen any massive disruptions that have come into the industry. The acceptable now is a challenge. That's the second one I would highlight. The third one is our collective egos. Our egos are a big part of the challenge in the insurance industry right now. They tell us we're right. They lead us to believe we're better than we are. They like to blame others for issues and challenges. So we need to create a deeper understanding of our egos. And if we can do that, I think we could really start thinking through what the 21st century is going to mean and bring to this industry in a far more effective way than we're doing right now. So those three elements for me probably describe the current state of leadership in the industry.
And why is leadership so needed? Maybe it's always been needed, but why is it particularly needed right now?
Yeah, the next 10 years will represent more change and disruption in the industry than we've seen in the last 100 years. I mean, we still have people in this industry in certain parts of the world walking around with paper under their arms, going to the box to speak to a person and get a wet signature. It's a challenge for this industry to realize and understand and fully appreciate what the next 10 years are going to bring. And it's not just the insurance industry. Other industries are facing the same types of things. You think about the automotive industry. Think about driverless and autonomous car. What are the next 10 years going to bring to that industry? Truly interesting conversation. The same goes for insurance. So I think the next 10 years are really going to define so much about what happens to us going forward. Leaders are going to have to embrace the next 10 years like they never, ever had before. So I think that's a big part of what we need to look at.
And so what do you see as the winning attributes and skills of a successful leader in insurance moving ahead?
Yeah, so one I would point to is probably a mindset, and the other I'll point to I would describe as a skill set. So first, the mindset. So as I just mentioned, a lot is going to happen in the next 10 years, significantly more than has played out probably in the past 100 years. So leaders will excel if they have what I describe as a liberal arts mindset. And let me explain that a little bit more. We have to have a broad view of not just the insurance industry, but the world. We certainly need to understand more deeply the topics of technology, operations, the economics of our business, geopolitical dynamics, all of that. But more importantly, or I should say equally important, we need to also understand critical insights that are available to us outside of the insurance industry. As leaders, and this is part of this liberal arts mindset, are we students of history? Have we studied the great liberal arts leaders of the past, people like Da Vinci, who, if you read up on Da Vinci, just this fascinating education and background that he was exposed to that allowed him to connect dots that nobody had ever connected before. So, do we understand the dynamics of the Industrial Revolution and how moving from an agrarian society to the Industrial Revolution happened and what was required to make that happen? Do we understand that many of the organizational structures in the insurance industry right now probably emanated from the Industrial Revolution? And maybe it's time to kind of move past that. Gets into office design and other things that can come into this conversation. So I think there's this liberal arts mindset is going to be increasingly important for leaders to be successful in this complex next 10 years. So I put that out there. The second point is the skill set. If I was being asked to interview an executive for a position this afternoon for a new job, I almost don't need the job description. I almost don't need to know the technical area in which this executive is potentially being hired. My focus would be on interviewing her, understanding her skill set as a change agent. Her technical skills are certainly important, but without the ability to create change in her subject area, she's going to be completely limited relative to her value in the organization. There's so much to be learned about how change can happen more effectively in people and organizations, and it hasn't happened in this industry in so long. But the next 10 years are bringing change. And so leaders, successful leaders, high impact leaders, the next 10 years, skill set are going to be skilled at change. They're going to be world-class change agents. Winning is going to be considerably more challenging in the next 10 years than it has been in the last 100 years.
So I'm hearing that leadership in insurance involves two components: a liberal arts mindset and a change agent's skill set. I want to clarify, Don, is this discussion particular to insurance leadership, that is, executives and the C suite, or does it apply more broadly across an insurance organization to everybody?
Oh, I think the mindset skill set is a ubiquitous application. I think it applies to everybody. I think we'd all be well served with a liberal arts mindset. The echo chamber that we can so easily construct for ourselves can be destructive to our impact as a leader. So whether it's the mid-level of the organization or even as an independent contractor within an organization, just work hard to get outside of your comfort zone, to surround yourself through whatever medium with views and perspectives that are just not yours historically, that are going to challenge you, that are going to disrupt your conventional thinking. And so the liberal arts mindset, I truly believe, and we could talk about Da Vinci, we could talk about Steve Jobs, Shirley Chisholm. There's a lot of people out there that broke conventional norms in ways that really changed the world. And liberal arts mindset is really a key, and I think it goes through the entire organization. And then the change agent, the organic change that's required is going to happen on the front lines. And so this isn't necessarily something that's going to be driven by the C-suite. There's a lot of really impressive organic change movements that I've seen and been a part of in organizations that started at the front, at the organic ranks of the organization. So I think when I highlight the skill set and the mindset, I believe it's for everybody within an organization. And yes, if you're controlling people and process, you're a manager, but I think everybody can be a leader.
Don, I noticed that you come from a sales background, and I think in that case you can draw a line between effective leadership and the numbers that you're posting, but that's not always the case. In those cases where it is difficult, how can insurers measure whether or not people are being effective leaders?
There's no doubt that leadership has a few core measures. One is, I would put in the category, and you hit it, of profitable growth. Is there profitable growth? You can usually deliver profitable growth as Attila the Hun for a certain period of time, but at some point, the sustainability and the scalability is going to be tested by your efficacy as a leader, as opposed to a ruler. And so I think profitable growth is actually a very legitimate indicator of leadership. But I think there's other measures beyond that. For me, what I always felt was very important are the people that I'm serving, often my direct reports and beyond, are they growing on to bigger, better things than what they were doing with me? And if they are, then I always felt some level of validation that I did good as a leader that day.
You've mentioned that the insurance industry will likely experience more change in the next 10 years than they have over the past 100. We've talked a lot about the people part of the equation, but we'd be remiss not to talk about technology too. So how does technology fit into this discussion?
Technology really is going to, I think, redefine this industry in so many ways. It's going to disrupt the value chain in the industry. And, if I look at what's most familiar to me, I just most recently came out of the brokerage world. And, in the future, organizations may be able to access capital directly. Clients may be able to use technology to do their own policy comparisons. Technology may provide them access to rich data and benchmarking insights. And with that, we have a disrupted value chain. So technology is clearly going to redefine our industry over the next 10 years. There's no doubt in my mind. It's not the next 3 years, but it's certainly in the next 10 years. Something profound will begin to take root.
And how do you suggest insurance leaders can address the changes that come with technology?
So my advice for leaders in this space is to invest your time where the puck is going. A hockey reference is like, where's the puck going? Not where has the puck been? And so I try to do that on a personal level. I invest time as an advisor with 2 technology companies. So it's immensely helpful for me to spend time with these organizations who are showing me where the puck's going. And that is just fundamentally what I would challenge anybody listening to this podcast to do and to think about today. Just where's the puck going, and how can you situate yourself there and learn and grow as a part of that experience?
Thank you, Don. That's great advice. We have just enough time for a few wrap-up questions. What's the biggest challenge facing the insurance industry today?
So much of what the insurance industry is facing probably falls into 3 buckets. One, data, in the whole world of predictive analytics. Digital, we talk about that. Much of the industry is highly tenured. Digital transformation is going to be tough. And then alternative capital. It comprises most of the capital raised over the past 10 years, and much of that remains on the bench. When it gets in the game, it's going to be disruptive.
What's the biggest opportunity facing the insurance industry today?
So everybody leading an organization right now has been pulling levers. Here's a profit lever, here's a growth lever, here's an engagement lever. So all these different levers have been pulled over the past several years. I believe that there's one big lever, maybe the biggest lever, and it ties into this entire podcast topic, that can be pulled, and it's the leadership lever. Companies are investing in so many things within their organizations. I'd ask them to think about how much they are investing in leadership development. Ask yourselves, what outcomes could we create if we were better leaders? I think there's a lot of good answers to that question. Pull the leadership lever.
What trends should be on the industry's radar?
We think about trends that are near us, that are familiar to us, that are in proximity to us. So ones that we can readily see and understand. So beyond what I mentioned before about data, digital, and alternative capital, for me, the biggest trends we need to worry about are the ones in the insurance industry that are not on our radar right now. The ones we're not familiar with, because they're the unknown, as our friend Mr. Rumsfeld would say. This gets us some of the conversation on the liberal arts mindset as well. Are we pushing ourselves to make sure we see trends we normally would never see? Most notably, I think about it in terms of competitors. In the next 10 years, the competitive landscape is going to change. Names we've never heard of are going to be in our kitchen. And so seeing those trends is harder than ever and has never been more important.
And what technology will have the greatest effect on the industry over the next 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, I don't think you can pick one. I don't think there's a organization, a segment, a part of this industry that isn't going to be massively disrupted by technology. And the issue is going to be how prepared are we for that? So technology really is going to redefine this business over the next 10 years. And it's going to be a challenge because so many companies, not all, but so many of the companies that are 80, 100 years old are just highly tenured organizations with people that sometimes are not far from retirement, aren't really interested in a lot of change, and are really going to be challenged by the digital transformation that is going to redefine this business in the next 10 years.
Thank you, John. This has been such an interesting conversation. Appreciate your taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you.
That was the first part of my conversation with Don Bailey, a leadership coach with Bristlecone. In 2 weeks, he'll be back with fascinating insight into leadership, its common impediments, and its success factors. He'll explain why trust is so important and how organizations inadvertently damage trust. He'll also explain why adversity isn't something to avoid, but something to embrace. Join us in 2 weeks for that episode. Until then, I'm Igrani Yu. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Accenture Insurance Influencers podcast. To hear more great episodes, visit accenture.com/insuраnceinfluencers.